So you want to know where that dog is. It's like anything else. You get better at it with practice. People have lost their ability to find dogs because they don't practice, because they don't have to. And so part of that is just being in tune and really listening and paying attention to what that dog's doing and where it's going instead of your screen. And just part of it's hearing a bell stop, looking at the landscape and going, I'll bet that dog's over there. Yeah, so you're looking for application to the ground, style and movement. You got to have bird finding ability, and then style on the birds. They're looking for an overall performance. They're looking for a dog that's pleasant to watch moving. They're looking for a dog that's going to the right place, knows its name, responds to the handler when needed, finds birds. Looking for a dog that can get those birds stuck and looks good doing it and has perfect manners. And then at the end of the race, you're like, wow, that was fun. I like that. You're winning.
All right, everybody, welcome to the show for the first time. Brett Edstrom. Brett, how we doing this morning?
Very well, thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk cover dog trials with you amongst everything else. You know, we've spoken on the phone a few times, and we've kind of covered a whole lot of bases more so than just cover dog trials, but I know that's something that you're specifically passionate about. But let's go ahead, start off, introduce yourself, tell everybody where you're calling from, what kind of dogs you run, all the fun backstory.
Oh, well, so I'm calling you from the Minnesota-Wisconsin border. Currently, I'm a pointer guy mostly, but I do have setters on occasion, and then I did the English cockers too. I've got some of them. So I got my start in the retriever world way back before I could even drive. I was fortunate enough to work for a guy named Bill Wunderlich, who's a Hall of Fame retriever trainer. I didn't know it then. But my mom would drive me out when it was getting light and drop me off at the kennel and then come pick me up after dinner. And I just threw birds, caught birds, cleaned kennels, and followed him around for a couple summers, and then gradually moved into horses and then bird dogs. So that's where I really found my passion was the pointing dogs. So
yeah. So talk to me about what it was like being under, like you said, in the moment, you guys didn't really recognize the caliber or the extent of his career or legacy, I should say, in the retriever world. But talk to me about what it was like in hindsight, thinking back on all the time and spent and mucking kennels and whatever else he needed you to do under the wing of somebody that was so prevalent in that space.
You know, what you pick up is that the dog training is kind of an attitude more than a method. I learned the same thing when I was in college. I worked for a couple different horse trainers, and it's, they did things differently, but they have kind of similar attitudes. And, Bill, one day he lent me out to another trainer. I won't say who the name was, and it was a very different experience. And he was very hard on his dogs, and, also very successful, but just a completely different way of doing things. And I actually walked out of there partway through the day and walked back to Bill's. I couldn't take it. And I asked him why he did that. And he said, well, whose dogs run with more sparkle? And I said, well, yours do. He says, well, now you know. That you don't have to do that to get the dog to a high level. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
So I kind of carried that through. Now, Bill wasn't necessarily he didn't let him get away with murder. I mean, if he had to be hard on him, he was, but it was quick, and it was over, and then it was moving on, and it wasn't constant.
And what age was this around that you went and ventured
out?
I
was probably 14.
14. And so at 14 years old, as impressionable as we all are at that age, was it more so, what was the other trainer's approach really that stark compared to Bill's? Or was it just more you were comfortable with Bill, you kind of knew what you were getting in it?
No, it was completely different. So you would literally have to stand when you were throwing birds. You have to have a cattle prod in your hand.
Oh, wow.
Because if the dog came to you for help, you had to shock them. And that was it for me. I'm out of here.
Yeah, it kind of robs the pleasure and enjoyment of training dogs if you're going to that extent.
Yeah, but you got to. So at that time was when the training collars were just coming in, and so guys were learning how to use them, and the way we do things now is so much easier and so much better. But you forget that it wasn't always the time. You didn't always have that collar. In those days, guys were still shooting dogs. If they moved off a line, they'd pepper them with the, number nines or whatever. And all that stuff's gone now.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Yeah. There's better ways, better information out there, but putting somebody listening to this might be like, oh, I can't believe that they train dogs that way, but put yourself back then, it was a completely different world mentality wise, just even society had a different outlook on that stuff. It was just kind of, the phrase breaking a dog had a kind of a different context and meaning back then than what it does currently.
Yes. I mean, it really did mean that. And the way they force broke dogs back then was, it wasn't much fun for the dog.
Yeah.
Or the person, but for sure not the dog.
Yeah.
And the ones that could take it, they went on and got bred, and it changed kind of the way, it changed the dogs that were available to people. And, now you've got I'm not a retriever expert anymore, but that's some of the reason why you see people going back to, like, you need an English Labrador versus an American Labrador, on down the line. It's just because some of those dogs were pretty tough, and dealing with them took more than a lot of people wanted to put into it.
Right.
Yeah.
So thinking back on that, I'm curious to your thoughts. Somebody might hear that changed the lines or the type of dogs to where if they were tough enough, they could get their way through the training, then they would be bred. I'm curious, thinking back on that, hindsight's 2020. Do you think that more or less we, by doing that, ended up with more quote unquote stubborn dogs, which some people might have labeled back then as being trainable? They can take the training, they have enough drive, but it makes me curious of how many really high caliber dogs were washed out just because of the means that we went about
I don't
it.
know. It's hard to say. And again, I'm not a retriever expert. We're going through the same thing right now, in my opinion, with pointing dogs. So there used to be a real premium placed on a dog that ran forward. And, in the field trials, it's still important. But the dog's got to be in front of you. Go forward, go forward, go forward. But that wasn't just a style thing. There was a purpose behind it. And the reason is you didn't have a GPS collar. And so if you didn't know where the dog was and you suspected it was on point, it eliminated a lot of ground. You had to go look because you just assumed that dog was forward. And now it doesn't matter, because people just look at their screen and they can go to the dog. It doesn't matter if it's behind them or over there, or it doesn't matter. So the incentive to breed a dog that naturally runs to the front isn't as strong as it was. Mm-hmm. So field trial people still kind of look for it, but the gun dog breeders, they don't care anymore.
Right. In your opinion, your personal opinion, do you think that maybe that we have lost something in that instance of caring about always being to the front, or do you think that it's just kind of baked into the cake at this point that we haven't gained or really lost anything in that regard?
It's just a different style, because there's the reason you wanted the dog in front was it made it easier to find it. It doesn't matter. So did you lose something? Well, if I want to go try to win a field trial with that dog, yes. I have to teach it to go to the front, or it washes out, it won't work. But as a gun dog, it doesn't matter. Because who hunts without a tracking collar now? Nobody.
So you learned a lot from Bill, but you said that you transitioned from retrievers into horses, then pointing dogs. Can you kind of talk about your progression through that? Because it's interesting. There's so much similarities and crossovers between horses and dogs. It's
very similar.
Yeah, it's a natural fit, but I'm curious how you kind of ended up going in that path from retrievers to horses to pointing dogs.
I liked walking, and the horses was really fun, and I enjoyed that, but I like the hunting, and I like being, wild places and that stuff. And so I just kind of missed that. And then when I decided to get back into bird dogs, I had an old teacher of mine. He was actually the vice principal of my junior high, and he was hardcore into the grouse dog stuff. And I somehow, and I don't remember how it happened, I got hooked up with him and started going down that road and got into the pointing dog stuff. I originally wanted to buy a red setter for some reason. That's what I wanted. And there was an old red setter breeder, one of the original guys that took that. This guy's name was Edstrom, and he was from St. Cloud, Minnesota. And he was one of the guys that helped take that Irish setter and turn him into a red setter. And he had this kennel in St. Cloud, and he was an old time dog guy, classic old time dog guy. And I went out there to look at his dogs and get on the list for a litter of puppies or something. Well, he saw me coming a mile away, and I was there with my girlfriend, who's now my wife. And he said, well, before I show you these red setter puppies and stuff, I've got this English set that I want you to look at. And he pulled out of the kennel this little setter puppy, and I don't know, he was probably 5 months old, 4 or 5 months old. And my wife now and girlfriend then had just recently lost her grandmother. And one of the reasons she came with me is kind of take her mind off that. So he lets this puppy out of the kennel, and just my wife bends over, the thing runs over and licks her on the nose. She starts bawling, and we went home with that dog.
Yeah, imagine that.
Worst dog ever. But most of it was me. I mean, I did everything wrong. And then somehow I get hooked up with my old high school vice principal, and he, helped me with that dog some, and ended up going down that road and getting into the grouse trials. And I kind of stayed there doing that for many, many years. Mm. And then when my daughter was probably 10 or 12, we moved to the southern part of Minnesota, and you just get busy doing the dad thing. And those, to keep a dog right and get it ready for a grouse trial just takes a ton of time. To work the dog, it takes an hour because they got to be in shape to run an hour. You got to get them on wild birds and blah, 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 blah. It was just too hard to do. So I switched to cockers for a while she was growing up, and we lived down there. And then now she's out of the house, and I'm back further north. So it's back to the grouse dogs.
Nice. Going back to your red setter, you said that you just screwed it all up. Were you more
the first English setter? It was an English setter.
English setter, sorry.
Yeah.
You said that you screwed it all up. I'm curious, did you go about training that setter as more of what you learned in the retriever side of the game? What really did you screw up?
What I didn't do was get him on birds when he was younger. And I ran him a lot. He loved to run. And that's how I figured I'd better go field trial this dog. He'd tear all over the place. But I'd run him dry all the time. And I didn't know better. And they just get to farting around. And it just doesn't work. So he just never got a really good start. And then I just didn't have the ability to help him catch up. If I had him now, he'd probably be fine.
Yeah.
But then he was a problem. And that dog loved to chase deer. He loved to chase bears, which were a big problem because bears run along. They go a lot further than deer do. So, I'd lose them half the time. I'd run them, and that son of a bitch would always make it home somehow. It might be 2 days later. But somehow, somebody, he would come out to a road and somebody would find him and call me.
So he just kept showing back home even when you thought that maybe he was gone for good.
And if he was a really good dog, you'd lose him the first time and never see him again.
Right. Everybody was willing to give him back to you.
So he kept hoping, maybe this time he won't come back.
So when you got linked up with your vice principal that kind of steered you down through the into the grouse woods or the grouse trials, did you compete with this dog or did you go and get a second dog?
So it was pretty funny. So the first trial I took him to, and like I said, this dog, when I worked him, he just ran all over. I mean, he didn't point anything hardly ever, but he ran. And I get to the trial, I enter him in the puppy stake, and he just the situation overwhelmed him. I don't know what it was, but he walked down the trail about 20 yards in front of me for the entire 15, 20 minutes of the puppy stake. It was very humiliating. And I didn't know better than just to pick him up, which is what you do now. You just put him on a leash. It's not your day. It's not working. But I walked him. He walked in front of me for the whole thing. And people are trying to be so nice. And they came up to me afterwards and they said, "Boy, I bet he looks really nice laying by the fire."
Oh, yeah. Hey, that's one way of putting it, I guess. I don't think I've ever heard it put that way, but it makes sense. So,
Yeah.
when you talk about now, you would just go pick the dog up, put him on a leash. It's not your
Yeah.
day, and that's just from the dog that's just meandering down the path alongside you.
There's a lot of reasons that you might do that. I mean, if it's just not happening for the dog, you just typically you just pick them up.
Mm. Well, can you describe as a whole, because I want to get into the actual cover dog circuit, the trials, the formats, the rules, and all that stuff. But let's
Yep.
start by painting the picture of what a quote unquote like proven cover dog trial grouse dog actually looks like, how they hunt, range, so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's a big, people often ask about that and it's really hard to describe. And so they're actually just shooting dogs. I don't really feel like there is a cover dog bred dog. They're shooting dogs. They're the same dogs that you run off the course in a shooting dogs. It's just the venue's different and their pattern's a little bit different because of the venue. So you have a dog that's wearing a pretty big bell, um, and they need to be on the edge of that bell for most of the brace. Brace is an hour for a shooting dog. It's a half hour for an all age dog. It's a half hour for a derby. It's 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes for a pup. So they need to be as far away as they can. They need to be hitting the cover correctly. So they need to be going where you would expect to find birds. And the handler has to stay on the course. So that may be really close, it may be really far. It just depends, and it changes throughout the brace. But the dog needs to be going forward and it needs to be running towards the edge of that bell for most of the time. But when that bell stops, you have to be able to walk to the dog in a reasonable amount of time. So that's how far they are. You can't, it has nothing to do with yards. It has nothing to do with distance. It's just, is the dog pushing the edge? But can you find him when it stops?
Yeah.
And if the answer to both is yes, you're in good shape.
And back to your earlier point, talking about how nowadays so many of us are used to just being able to stare down at their screen, or not even the screen anymore, just look down at their watch and be able to tell direction and distance for their dogs. It's a little bit different when you are dependent on the bell as really your only indication. And once they actually go on point, that lifeline is no longer there, right? It forces you to have to pay attention to where your dog was and is, and also if they outrun the bell, then there's no telling where they went, right? Like you might be following in the last or in the direction of the last time you heard the bell, and maybe they took a right or a left, and you honestly have no idea where they are at
Yeah,
this point.
nothing. Yeah, yeah. So you're allowed a scout, one scout, and that scout is in the gallery until you send them. And then you ask the judge, "Can I send the scout?" So if you don't know for sure what's going on with the dog, which happens quite a bit, you can send a scout out, and they can and you give them a general area, and they can try to find the dog. Or you can have a scout, and you can go in and you can both look at the dog. But that generally doesn't work out super well. So you want to know where that dog is and have a pretty good idea. Now, it's like anything else, you get better at it with practice. And, that's one thing I've noticed coming back to the sport after being away from it for a while is that people have lost their ability to find dogs because they don't practice because they don't have to. And so part of that is just, as you mentioned, just being in tune and really listening. and paying attention to what that dog's doing and where it's going instead of your screen. And just part of it's, hearing a bell stop forward and to the right and just walk in that direction and then looking at the landscape and going, I'll bet that dog's over there.
Yeah.
And it is.
I've spoken on this show in the past about, I don't do it all the time, but I do try and do a couple runs per year where I don't have the tracking collar. All I have is a bell, or even completely silent if I'm on ground such as my own property or neighbors, to where I know that there are birds out there and it's safe to run, right? As there's no busy roads. I know where the dog's going to go, but I like pulling myself out of the reliance or dependency of the tracking collar and even the bell sometimes, because to your point, you almost kind of get a second sense of what your dog is going to do, how they're going to hunt, how they're going to check this off. And I'm not going to sit here and try and pretend like I know where my dog is 1,000% of the time, because that's just not true. But if you don't get the reps, if you don't get the practice of being in the woods while there's no indication of telling you where your dog is, it does force you to pay attention to your dog. And you're just naturally going to learn a little bit more about how your dog likes to hunt, how they're going to dip into this cover, so on and so forth. And to me, it honestly brings a little bit more variety or edge of your seat moments to the entire hunt. Like, the hunt actually passes by a little bit faster because you're paying such close attention to the dog. And so I'd encourage everybody, again, do it in a safe environment to where you don't have to worry. If your dog is the one that you let loose and it just runs to the horizon, maybe you don't do it with that type of dog. Be smart. Don't be dishonest about what your dog's capability is on this. But if you do have the dog and it's in a safe area, don't be afraid to turn that screen off, or even leave the tracker on the dog and just leave the handheld or the remote in your backpack or something, to where you can't reference it.
Yeah. I always have it but I just don't look at it unless I absolutely have to.
Yeah.
But again, that's just because I don't want to lose that ability to find the dog and know where the dog is. And as I get older, it's going to be more of an issue.
Yeah.
But if you have no aspirations of doing anything, else, I guess it really doesn't matter. But it is fun. It's really fun when you're not quite sure where a dog is, and it's not moving, and you find it. It's fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, picture we get excited if we, go around a tree and we randomly come across a ruffed grouse that we didn't know was there. We get super excited. Imagine that experience with your own dog on point, on that grouse. It makes it even that much more exciting. I'm curious. You described the gallery. You described having a scout. Describe how this actually transpires from the moment that y'all, at the breakaway. Talk to us about, who's walking with you, how many people are in the party. Is the judge right alongside you the entire time, or are they trying to follow the dog? Just describe the whole brace environment, I guess.
Yeah. So there's multiple courses at each grounds because the trials are held on grouse and wood. And so there's a course marked with flags usually, and it's usually trimmed and cut. So it's easy to walk. And it's 2 miles long in general because the race is an hour. And so at the pace that you go on average is about 2 miles an hour over the course of an hour. So you've got a trail through the woods that's 2 miles long. And there's 2 handlers with 2 dogs, so a brace, and there's 2 judges. So the handlers are in front, and then they're followed by the 2 judges. And the judges might be right in your back pocket, or you might be a little ways in front of them. But they're not watching you much. They're just trying to keep track of their dogs. And each judge is paying attention to just one of the dogs, because you just can't watch them both. And then halfway through the race, they switch. or if one dog gets picked up, then they're both watching the single dog. So it's time. So when you break away the dogs, they start a stopwatch, and after an hour, you're done, or a half hour if it's disturbance.
Mm.
They experiment with some longer stakes, but they don't. I don't think they're doing them anymore.
Yeah. And so,
And then the gallery's in the trail behind the two judges. So nobody can walk in front of the judges except the handler.
okay. And could it be just however many people you guys want in the gallery? There's no
many, whoever wants to come comes. So it might be 2 guys and it might be 20.
okay. And are the same 2 judges that are on this brace, are they judging all of the braces? Like if they get, so they're getting shuttled back to the breakaway and then starting the next brace the next
so
day?
you get done and you go to the next course because you don't rerun the courses generally in the same day. And if you do, there's a couple grounds where they can do that, but those are primary woodcock grounds, and that's fine because those birds don't go very far.
Yeah.
But generally, there's 6 to 8 courses on a ground, and you do a new one for each brace, and then you start over on the next day.
Okay. So if you have 6 to 8 courses, then you only have 6 to 8 braces total for the day if you're not rerunning the same.
But I'll tell you, if you're a judge and you're walking, that's plenty.
Yeah, I was about to say at 2 miles a clip.
14 miles.
Yeah.
At minimum, you put 14 miles in a day, and that's plenty.
Yeah.
To me, anyways.
Especially, I'm assuming that your dog goes and their job is to go find the birds, and if the birds are in the cover, then that.
Yeah. So yep. So when the dog goes on point, the judge and that handler go in to see what's going on. Mm. And they may have a scout with you too if you don't know right where it's at.
Gotcha. In terms of the judging, what qualifies a judge? I'm assuming every organization has a different criteria and a mentoring process or what have you. In the cover dog trial, how does somebody become qualified to be a judge?
It's different. So I'm actually I've judged AKC Spaniel hunt test. I've judged AKC the Cocker field trials, and they have a very specific, you have to take a course, you have to take tests, and then you have to do apprenticeships under some other judges, and then you're okay. And then you're a certified judge under AKC. The UKC, what's now the UKC / American Field, there is no qualifications like that. You simply earn the respect of your peers over time, and you're asked to judge.
Interesting.
Which freaks some people out, but having done both, the quality of the judging is about the same.
Right, I can imagine that. So
some people are good at it, some people aren't, and it's like everything in life. The more you do it, the better you get.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're talking about different games, and hunt tests, you have it against the standard. When you're talking trials, you have subjectivity, right? And so when you're talking about a game and a trial that involves subjectivity, and in the eyes of the judge, what they deem as style and whatnot, to me, it doesn't really bother me that the judges are kind of picked in the same way, in a subjective manner. It's kind of like, well, I mean, the game we're playing has a certain factor of subjectivity. So what difference does it make if the judges are selected that way?
Yeah, and typically you start, judging puppies and then judge derbies, and they generally, you pair newer people with more experienced judges, and then you move on from there. And you're right, it's subjective, but all of it is. Hunt tests are, the tests are subjective.
Yeah.
I mean, you just can't get away from it. It's just people looking at dogs.
Yeah. Everybody has their own set of eyeballs.
Yeah. So I never found judging a hunt test to be any less subjective than judging. Mm-hmm. But that's just me.
So
there's some judges that are going to try to pass that dog no matter what. I mean, their goal is to get that dog a master hunt.
Yeah. That's funny.
There's other people that if they put a toenail on the line, you're out. It's just how it is.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. It's like you can go out and there are some judges or systems that more or less it's kind of like as long as you don't lose it, if you don't blow it up, you're passing. And then other judges, you go out there and it's like that judge is like, this dog has to earn the, the pass. It's you
Yeah,
have two different perspectives on that front.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There's some judges that dog around and bite them.
Right. Well, what during an actual brace, what is the
Yep,
judge actually looking for? We already just said that there's subjectivity. One judge cares
yep.
more about this than that, but as a general guideline or rule, what are the judges supposed to actually be being grading?
Yeah, so you're looking for applications to the ground. You're looking for style and movement. You're looking for style, and well, before that, you got to have bird finding ability and, and then style on the birds. Um, but generally, at least when I judge, and I've judged a ton, and I don't break it down into parts, and most really good judges don't. They're looking for an overall performance. They're looking for a dog that's pleasant to watch moving. They're looking for a dog that's going to the right places. They're looking for a dog that knows its name and comes when that's, responds to the handler when needed. They're looking for a dog that finds birds. They're looking for a dog that can get those birds stuck and looks good doing it and has perfect manners. And then at the end of the race, you're like, wow, that was fun. I like that. You're winning
It sounds like
until
the
somebody
judges
knocks you out.
yeah, it sounds like ultimately the judge is just looking for the dog that they want to throw in the truck with them and take home.
Yeah, some people look at it that way. It's often that described that people are looking for the best dog on that day. I don't look at it that way because I can't tell who's got the best dog in an hour.
Right.
I'm looking for the best performance that pleases me
Hmm.
on that given day, and that my co-judge likes to. Because you have to remember, you're not judging it by yourself.
Right.
So sometimes you'll get in a situation where the first half hour that dog is just rocking it, and I really am excited about what I'm seeing. And then we switch, and maybe we get separated. That does happen. Say, my dog has a find, the other dog goes forward because they're still hunting, and you never see him again. So then I might get to the end of the brace, and you're super excited about this dog, and then you ask your co-judge, and they say, "No, it's crap," and then you're bummed. But there it is.
Yeah.
The dog had 4 unproductives, and I can't use that dog or whatever happened.
Yeah. So I want to talk about handler impact because every handler, just like every judge, has a different criteria of what they prefer. Every handler for sure has a different perspective or preference, I should say, in what they want to see in their dogs, as well as just how they handle the field, how often they're talking or communicating to the dog. Some people, I imagine, go out there and they probably don't say a word the entire brace, while other people go out there and it's like they don't shut up the entire time. So I'm curious from your perspective as a judge, how much impact does the actual handler's approach have on the outcome of a brace?
It can have a huge impact because it's a team effort. And so your job as a handler is to show your dog to the judges to the best of your ability. And so there's some people that are really good at it and other people that are not. And if a handler is really proficient, they can make that dog look its best. They can help. I shouldn't say make. They can help that dog look really well. And it's usually people who are proactive. So they keep that dog in a productive place. So they don't let the dog get behind them. They see a hard turn coming up, or they can see a spot where they think a dog might get stuck, and they just avoid it. And it's just something that takes time and practice. But a good handler can really, really enhance the race. And again, it's just something that you learn to do over time.
Yeah. What are some general tips or advice that you would give somebody that's going into their first trial? You said, knowing when to maybe enter certain cover or avoid a certain area. The first thing that comes to mind is I hate getting sucked into the tag alders on just a regular hunt. I can only imagine doing that on a trial when it's timed and you have the pressure and you're just in a crappy situation. So, what's some general tips or advice that you could encourage or discourage a handler from trying while out there on their first brace?
Well, basically, what I would say is that just don't be afraid to handle your dog. So often, people when they're new, or they're afraid of handling their dog because they feel like it doesn't look good. But we all handle the dog, and some people are really loud, some people are kind of quiet, but everybody handles their dog. And so, don't be afraid to handle your dog. Keep it in front of you. If you've got a question, ask the judge, and then walk every other brace you can while you're there. Because I can't explain to you how to do it. I just can't. You have to walk. And the people that, there's two kinds of dog people. There's people that really like dogs, and there's people who really like their dog.
You're right.
It's not a judgment. It's just kind of how it goes. And if you're only interested in your own dog and you don't walk a lot of braces and you aren't interested in seeing what other people's dogs are doing, then you aren't going to learn as fast. And you're probably not going to stick in the game because you'd rather go do something else, and which is fine. But if you're really interested in dogs and you want to get better at it, you've got to walk braces.
We talk about it in the same way in the training field too, is you have your one dog, you go to a training day or a training group, you can go out for 10, 15, even half an hour, get your training done. And if that's all you do, you're missing out on the opportunity to learn through everybody else's dogs and experience.
Right. Yeah.
To where
so you've probably noticed that at the training group. Some people go work their dog and then they go back and talk smart at the trucks.
Right. Yeah.
And then other people are just watching everything.
Yeah. Everybody's out there actually trying to learn as a group, because if you go out there, let's say you have a half hour training brace, you go out there for a half an hour, but the rest of the training day in group, they're working for 4 hours. You can get 4 hours of learning and downloading certain information and seeing multiple dogs and their reactions. You're going to learn exponentially more quicker by doing it that way than by only focusing on your one dog. It's kind of the same way in training as well as the trialing. I mean, that's the same way when every time I go experience a new circuit, be it, UFTA or NASTRA or NAVDA, I'm always asking, can I walk with you? Can I be in the gallery? Can I ride with the judge? At the very least, just stand on the edge and watch it from afar if the conditions allow. But if you're not sitting there trying to learn from the other people, you're kind of handicapping your learning curve a little bit.
Yep. And it just depends on your interest level. But yeah, some people hardly ever walk, and other people are, walking every race.
Right.
And those are the people that usually end up, the people that are walking a lot, they're doing it because they really like it. They're interested in it. And they end up being the ones that start kicking your butt down the road.
So in the actual trial itself, you mentioned these are actually 100% wild birds. They're not planted. Are the courses even, you said that you guys don't run the same course multiple times throughout the day. I'm curious, does anybody even actually walk the course before the run, like just to kind of clear it off or anything like that? Okay.
No.
So it's a perfectly clean, you have no idea what's out there. There may be nothing. There may be 500 birds. Who knows?
Yep. And that bothers some people, and they think that, that it's puts too much chance in it. But yeah, there's chance in everything. There's some people would prefer a planted bird trial because they feel like it's fair because everybody has an opportunity on birds, and that's true. But having done a lot of planted bird trials with both, especially with the cockers, it's all planted birds because you're killing stuff. But then having done and judged the planted bird trials in the pointing dog world, it's still random and chance. You can get a crappy bird in the planted bird trial, that flies and tries to land in your dog's head, and your dog moves and you're out.
Right.
Or won't fly. Or, there's just, it's there's no way to remove all the chance, and just the appeal of running on wild birds is worth it. I mean, I just enjoy it. Plus, you're just bombing through the grouse woods all day. It's not the light.
Well, and at the end of the day, if our goal or mission is to build an actual grouse dog, a hunting dog, what's a better proving grounds than an actual hunt, right? The only thing that's separating a cover dog trial from an actual hunting scenario is that it's a paid for competition, right? Like that's
Yeah, and
really
you're
the only
not shooting it.
difference.
Yeah, you're not killing the bird. So if retrieving's important to you, which understandably it is for a lot of people. I mean, you're not going to know anything about that, but you will know if that dog can handle a wild bird and get it pointed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if it can move through the cover, and does it understand where to go on the course?
Yeah.
Yes.
So dealing with the wild birds, we have grouse and we have woodcock. Is one worth more than the other in the eyes of the judge? Like a dog that handles a grouse better than a woodcock, does that go, does the dog get additional points, or at least just talk to me about the impression of woodcock versus
Yeah, I
grouse?
would say, in theory, a fine is a fine is a fine. But very few people that I know treat them the same. A grouse find is usually more impressive to the judges than a woodcock, just because woodcock are easier to get pointed.
Yeah. Well, and then very often, especially if you're kind of in the middle of a flight or something, how many times have we been in an area that has woodcock and you can't even hardly get your dog
You
out of
can't,
that
yeah,
area?
yes.
It is a blast. Don't get me wrong. Anybody listening to
Yeah,
this, like, this isn't a bad thing. It's every time I find myself in it, I have to remind myself, it's like, all right, I've shot my woodcock limit and you can't even get out of that area without pointing 30 more woodcock. Every time that
yes.
happens and I start getting annoyed, I'm like, just think about what you're complaining about here.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
just
Yeah,
heal the dog off and get out of there. It's an embarrassment of riches. But I can
yes.
imagine if you get in that scenario in an actual trial, what's the best rule of thumb? Is it better to get out of there or just let the dog
You're
go?
moving anyways. I mean, you have to stay on the course. So once your dog has a fine, you generally have to collar that dog back to the course and let it go again. So it's not, on occasion you can get in a situation where you're just going from point to point to point to point. If you run into a flight of woodcock, but it's pretty rare, um, because you're moving. You're back to the course, you're moving. And the courses aren't generally solid bird cover, because you want to see, I mean, everyone's different and every grounds is a little different. But generally, you want to see the dog change its application when you're moving from really good cover to not so good. So it's generally not an issue. I think the most fines I think I've seen is maybe 12 an hour,
Mm.
which is a lot. I mean, that's very rare. And there's times when things just aren't going right. It's the spring and it's hot or whatever, and you're pretty darn happy to have that woodcock find.
Right.
And you very well could win the field trial with that. But generally speaking, they're referred to grouse trials for a reason. People like to see those grouse get pointed.
Yeah. Well,
Now, woodcock are way easier to point, but I will say, over the years, I've seen more dogs crash, manners wise, on woodcock than I have on grouse, because the grouse just blows out and they're gone, and it's pretty easy for the dog to just stand there. And the woodcock goes or flops down, 10
oh,
feet
I
from the
I
dog.
didn't I didn't
You
think
know,
about that. Usually, yeah, you're right. When grouse
yeah,
kind of get up, when they decide to get out of town, they're getting out of town.
they
Woodcock,
leave, they leave.
woodcock. I've seen multiple times where they're flush and they just land 10 yards in front of you. So I can imagine
Yeah,
that putting, if you have a dog just on the tip of, on the edge of tipping over, and a woodcock just kind of flutters 10 yards away, I can see a dog breaking on that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I've always contended that grouse are harder to point, but easier to stay broke on, and woodcock are easier to point and more difficult to stay broke on.
Interesting. What
Mhm.
about in the scenario? Do you get any additional points, or is it still just counted as one find if the dog points a grouse and there's multiple grouse there? This happens pretty regular. There's two, three, four
Yeah,
birds in an
there's no
area.
points, so there's no points, but it goes into part of the performance. So if it's a really cool find, it's a really cool find. And then, I mean, if I walk in and the dog's got and birds start blowing out all around the dog, that's pretty cool. I like that.
Especially if the
So if
dog
I'm
can
the,
still hold its manners and stay
yeah,
through it.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't, it's not like, well, okay, you get 10 points instead of 5. It's just because it's general impression of the whole race is what the judge is going to look at. But yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So
It's supposed to be fun, and we're doing it for fun. And so anything that's cool and fun is good.
so if a dog points a bird, woodcock or grouse, and it ends up busting and breaking and bumping it, do you guys
Yeah,
just continue on for the rest of the time, or does the judge say pick up your dog?
pick up your dog.
Okay. So you're not going through the
There's
full
again,
hour.
there's no rules, but 99.999% of the judges in the world will pick you up. The only time you have, as a judge, you have to pick up a dog, or you're quote unquote required to pick up a dog, is if it's interfering with the race.
Mm. So
So
blowing
there's
off a
no
pack or something like that.
tagging it, wanting to fight, or not backing, or just you know, for whatever reason, if you feel like that dog is messing up with messing his brace made up, you're
Yeah.
supposed to pick it up.
Yeah.
Not very rarely happens. Um, but a breach of manners on birds will almost always get you on the hook. Now, a couple steps depends on the circumstances. So if I'm starting out to judge a trial and I've got 30 dogs I know I'm going to look at before I'm done, and it's the first brace. And I don't know what conditions are like. I don't know how the day's going to go. And that dog's going to get a lot longer leash because I don't know what I've got. And I need a dog. I don't want to place a dog on race. I want to place a dog on birds. So if that dog jumps a little bit when it's birds or whatever, I'm not going to pick it up. But if I got a really nice performance and the dog had great manners, great race, everything, he's winning this thing going away, and your dog takes a couple of big hops, now I'm going to pick you up because I don't need you.
Yeah. Makes sense and fair in my opinion. You
Yeah.
you mentioned springtime. You're running these trials in the springtime. You guys also run these in the fall often as
Yep.
well. It's not just spring. So you do have a fall season and a spring season. Essentially, like kind of gets broken up if you guys get dumped on a bunch of snow, right? Like you guys are trying to do it more or less before and after the snowfall. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we need to get, you want to get done. The best trials happen for whatever reason is right after the snow melts. The birds act, just the dog works better, everything's better. The further you get into the spring, the more wanky things tend to get as Mother Nature starts doing what she does. And you want to be done before birds start nesting. And in some places, you're required to be done by a certain date. So yeah, and that it's not unusual for us to get snowed out in the spring trials. But I love the spring. I like the trial and I like the hunt. So spring trials are my favorite
Mm.
because you're not missing anything.
That you kind of answered one of the questions that I had looming in my head is
Mhm.
how somebody such as myself, I appreciate both. I appreciate the competition side of things. I appreciate the hunt testing, but the reason and the reason why I'm here and what got me into hunting dogs is to go hunt. And so
Mhm.
with there being a fall season, I'm like, man, it would be cool to go knock out a trial, but also, the thing that kind of makes me want to do this even more is it is so similar to hunting. Outside of you not shooting the bird and no retrieve, you are
Yeah.
still hunting. And so I can see how somebody could forego the actual quote unquote hunt to play the game, if you will. But you just kind of answered my question for what you personally prefer is kind of hunt in the fall and then play the game in the spring.
Yeah, I mean, I'll do a little bit of trial in the fall, but I mean, it's just, and it just depends on where you're at in your journey and what your interests are and all that stuff. I mean, might that change? May change over time. Who knows? Because as you get older, most of us kind of lose a little bit of our bloodlust. Um, but you've killed a lot of birds over your lifetime. So these days, my favorite time of the year as far as bird dog goes is the spring. I just have so much fun. I mean, the cover's down, you can see, you can run on, those woodcock coming up are just a hoot because, as they come in through the southern part of the state, you get to hunt them and tree rows and alder fingers and aspen cuts that are moving out into the fields. And it's kind of like a mini quail hunt, except for woodcock. It's the same sort of cover, and the dogs go the same, run it the same way. So it's just really really fun.
Yeah.
And there's nobody else out there, so you just.
Oh, I didn't.
I mean,
Yeah.
I was listening to your podcast, the George Bird Evans one, and they're quoting the guy saying, "God, I wish you could catch and release like trout." I'm like, "What's the matter with you? Of course you can."
Yeah, it's a fair
You should.
point. In this game,
You
you
never
can
hear of
do
a
that.
blank gun. I mean, you
Yeah.
don't have to. I mean,
Yeah.
you can do that. It's
Yeah.
really really fun.
Mm.
And if I always tell people if they want to go look at a grouse trial for the first time or a covered trial, go in the spring because you can see. When
Yeah.
you go to a late September, early October cover dog trial, all you're going to do is hear bells.
Yeah. Makes sense. So, I want to get into this. I want to start trialing and everything. What's kind of the end goal? Like, what are we working for championship wise, like prize wise? Like, what's the Super Bowl in this game, and how do you get there?
The Super Bowl in the cover dog world, I would say, is probably either the Invitational or the Grand National. So the Grand National is the national championship for grouse trials. And it moves around the country. Now, it's in Wisconsin this year for the first time ever. I won't bore you with the details, but the grouse trial circuits, it's divided up into regions. And there's Lake States, there's the Mid-Atlantic, and there's the Maritimes, and there's New England. I think I got them all. And the trial moves through there. So typically when it's in the Lake States in Michigan, because they've got a lot of history, they got great grounds, and they're set up pretty well for it. This year it was supposed to be in Pennsylvania. Long story short, Pennsylvania, their traditional grounds, they don't have a lot of birds on right now. And so they're going to run that trial in Wisconsin this year, which is going to be super fun.
Which part of
So
Wisconsin, and when
it's
is
going to be
that?
by Eau Claire. It's going to be near Eau Claire.
All right. Time
So
frame
that's
is
in November. But so that
November.
would be the Super Bowl. But everybody else is looking for, and then the Invitational is is in the spring, and that is they run. I think they're doing 6 dogs now. But anyways, the dogs that had accumulate the most points over the season are invited to the Invitational Championship, and then they run them all one day for an hour, and then they mix up the braces and they run them all again the next day for another hour. And then on the third day, the judges call back the dogs they want to see one more time, and then they name the champion and the runner up. I think that's the coolest trial, personally, because you got to go 3 days to win it.
And
And it's the spring when all the birds that are left somebody's been trying to kill them for at least 12 months.
And so we're talking, if you win that, is it a title championship, or is there
Yep,
money
yep.
exchange, or what?
No, I don't remember if the Invitational pays out, but in the Grand, I know the open trials generally pay out. The amateur trials obviously don't. So the AKC, you get a championship by accumulating points. You get so many points for first place, second place, third place, fourth place. In the UKC world, you become a UKC/American Field. It's just by winning a trial that's designated as a championship. So if you win a trial that's designated as a championship, your dog's a champion.
Gotcha. pretty
Yeah.
straightforward in my eyes on that front.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, real quick, can you distinguish the difference between an open dog and an amateur dog? Is it just an age limit difference, or is it a
No,
capability
open and
difference?
amateur is just who's running it. Same dog. If you're a professional, you can't run an amateur trial. So there's two governing bodies in the cover dog world. There's the American Field / UKC now, and then there's the AFTCA, which is Amateur Field Trial Clubs of America. And so they sponsor or sanction, however you want to, put it, the amateur stuff. And then if it's an amateur stake, you can't run if you make your living doing dogs.
Hmm. Makes sense. What about the breed? You mentioned pointers and setters at the very start of this. This is what you run, but typically is that primarily the two breeds you're going to see the most, or do you kind of see a
Yeah.
healthy representation of short hairs, Brittany's, anything like that?
No, mostly pointers and setters, but you do see short hairs, you do see Brittany's, on occasion, and they're fine. So Brittany's, there's more. I would say of the quote unquote versatile breeds, the most common that you'll see in the grouse woods is Brittany's. There's a tradition in part of the Brittany community that runs on. There's Brittany only grouse trials. And that goes back quite a ways. Like the Chippewa Valley Club, which is hosting the Grand this year, started out as a Brittany club.
Hmm. Interesting. So I'm assuming these are American Brittany's, not French Brittany's.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever seen a French Brittany.
Yeah.
But you can run whatever you want. It doesn't matter. There's no rule against it. As long as most clubs would probably take your entry even if you weren't registered with the UKC. Just if you won anything, it wouldn't matter. You wouldn't
Yeah.
be recorded.
But you could go out and have some fun either way.
Yeah.
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 What about,
So,
do they have these type of trials for flushing dogs?
no,
Just
that's one
pointings.
of the things that's kind of sad is that there's no wild bird stakes for flushing dogs that I'm aware of.
Mm.
And part of it makes sense because you got to shoot them because, a huge portion of a flushing dog's job is to make the retrieve. And, you can't really test that obviously unless you kill
Fair.
a bird. So
Yeah.
if I had a magic wand and I was going to have a cocker or a springer trial that the way I wanted it, you would have a first series on wild birds and you wouldn't shoot anything. And then you would call back the dogs that you really liked, that you felt like were a good wild bird dog. And then you'd run them on planet birds and kill birds and see if they could retrieve and mark and do all that fun stuff. But it's a totally different.
Yeah. I'd be down for
Super
that.
cool dogs though.
Yeah, I think somebody
Really
could
cool
pull
dog.
that off easily enough. If there was enough people in the area that really wanted to try that, I don't think that would be too difficult to arrange.
Well, you could do it. It wouldn't be easy. So you could do it, but there's not that much interest in it.
Yeah.
I mean, the people that do those trials are happy with what they got, and it's fine. It's not my cup of tea, just because I like being in the grouse woods. We have a walking sharptail championship up here in northern Wisconsin, and I like that just as much as the grouse trials, just because it's wild bird.
Yeah. It brings a certain element to these games when it's actual wild birds. It's that no human hands touch it. There's no human scent involved. There's no boot scent. There's no dogs tracking four-wheeler scent. None of that. It's truly dog versus bird and how you interact with the dog. It's for lack of a better term, it just seems a little bit more honest or even romantic when you think about it.
It's more. I think romantic's a better word. Because there's nothing easy about winning a planet bird trial. It's not any hard. It's not easier than winning a wild bird. It's just different. And I think what's so attractive for me to the wild bird venues is because to find wild birds, you got to go to cool places. I mean, just where you are is more appealing to me.
Yeah. No,
You know,
I can get
as
on board
much
with
as the
that.
wild birds are really, really cool, and obviously the draw, but the ground is equally as important. I mean, equally appealing to me because it's just a fun place to be, and it's fun to watch a dog work that kind of cover.
Yeah. Nope, makes sense to me. I mean, this is something I've been talking about trying this for a few years, and the problem or the challenge for me is obviously I live down here in the southeast, and there's
Yeah,
not going to be any wild bird trial down here in the southeast at any time soon. Uh, but getting up there and traveling is I had it on the calendar. I had a couple different trials this past spring, and then life got in the way. You know, you mentioned earlier how dad life kind of takes over. I'm kind of in that stage to where there's
and
certain
you only get one shot at that, so
right.
just do that.
Right. There's always going to be dog trials. I shouldn't say always,
Yep.
but hopefully there's going to be dog trials, once life kind of levels back out for me on that front. But with me, generally, I'm always in the Northwoods areas at some point during the fall. I need to just carve out a day or two to at least come attend one of the events, if not run it myself and get my butt kicked. But it's something that it's been on my list for years. I need to just do it, but it's so hard for me when I'm planning that fall trip and it's like all year long I'm waiting to go hunt and
Yeah.
shoot. It is hard for me to forego that. But again, there's really no difference other than you're just not shooting the bird.
Yeah, I mean it's not hunting, and it isn't. It isn't. I mean, it's much louder and much faster than the way most people hunt. Heck, it's louder and faster than when I'm hunting, because you're on a trail, um, and the dogs are driving forward, and it's just the paces for somebody who's not used to it. Even a moderate pace at a grouse trial is going to feel
Mm.
ridiculously fast. Um, and then the singing, people, if they're not used to it, and why would you be? It freaks some people out. I don't like it. Yeah, fine. It's not a right versus wrong, and it's not for everybody.
So
But
let
it's
expand
really fun.
expand on the singing. That's something that traditionally, but down here in the South, you used to have people that sang to their
It's the
dogs.
same. It's exactly what
Right.
you're used to hearing down there. It's the exact same thing. It's just because the dog, you don't want that dog coming all the way back. It's a waste of effort. You want the dog to stay in front hitting the cover. And so you sing to the dog so they know where you are without having to come back and look.
Yeah.
And some of them, you just sing a little bit and they stay right where they need to be. And some of them need some persuasion.
Now,
And
are you
sometimes you take a hard corner that it's new grounds to you and you didn't know it was coming. And before you know it, you're going, north and the dog's going south. And oh crap, I need that dog back right now. And they can get a little loud.
so are you a singer yourself, or you prefer the
Oh
quiet
yeah.
approach? All right.
No, I sing.
So what
Everybody sings to some degree. Nobody walks through there without making any noise. It can't happen.
So typically what are you singing? Because when I've been in the field with people that kind of sing, it's more or less just like, come around now, here we go now,
Yeah,
stuff like
everybody's
that.
got that. Yep. It's just that. It's not actually singing.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
you're not
you're not
singing a
belting a
song.
song out, but it's just
No,
you're
no.
essentially just telling the dog, "Hey, I'm still here. I'm headed in that direction."
Yep,
And
yep,
yeah.
yep. And good handlers have a different cadence depending on what they want the dog to do. There's usually there's a sound they make or a call they make that says you're fine, but here I am. You're
Right.
good. And then there's another one that says, no. You gotta go somewhere else.
It almost
So
reminds me, I've been in the field with some guys, and some guys it almost takes on like a military cadence tempo or
yeah,
something. That's what it
yeah,
reminds me of.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and everything within reason. I mean, there are some people that are absolute menace because they are so loud and so constant that it just drives everybody crazy. And it's really hard to be braced with somebody
Hmm.
you just can't hear your dog.
Well, on this note, would you say that if you take your dog out there and you're not a singer, if you're not constantly communicating with your dog and they get out in the field and they're just not used to having that level of communication, will the other handler singing constantly screw up your own dog? Have you seen
Very
that happen?
likely at first. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. But more often than not, some dogs it doesn't bother. Some dogs it bothers them, but they get over it really quickly, and other dogs take a while. So if you were to, it's less of an issue for me and the people that have been doing it for a while because you're out training dogs with your buddies, and so just as the dog grows up, they're exposed to it. But you do want to go out with puppy, and make sure that you run on the braces just for the fact that they got to get used to hearing somebody else belling around a little
Yeah.
bit. Yeah. So
They
I've seen that, yes. Not uncommon to have a dog, especially in a puppy stake. Somebody's new and they bring out their dog and you feel bad about it, but what are you going to do? The other handler has to handle the dog.
Right. So it's one of those
Mm-hmm.
things, I guess get your dog prepared for it or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
Makes
Yep.
sense. Brett, I mean, we've kind of we've sped through this entire topic and conversation. We could have easily slowed down and really kind of got down into the
Yep.
weeds and details on this. But what's something that we didn't cover, or I should have asked you that I didn't?
Oh, I don't know. I just want people to understand that if you want to look at it, if you want to give it a try, you're always going to be welcome. You don't necessarily have to have a pointer or a setter, um, or a field trial type dog to enjoy. We had a guy, and I can't remember his name, but he came out in the spring for a few years, and he had a setter that was, more of a Ryan type dog, a little bit bigger, a little bit slower, and he ran that thing in the spring, and he never won anything, but it was a really neat dog. I mean, she was just beautiful. And she didn't run really fast, really hard, but she just floated through the woods real pretty and went to the right places and almost always pointed to grounds. And most of us thought we really liked her. We didn't want her. She wasn't going to win, but she was a cool dog. And the guy enjoyed it and we enjoyed having him. So, don't hesitate to give it a try if you want.
Yep. At the end of the day,
And
it's supposed to be about fun and just enjoyment and getting out there with your dog.
yeah, don't take it too seriously. It's a loser's game. Even the very best, professionals that do it for a living that have won everything lose more than they win.
Hmm.
It's just how it is.
Yeah.
And do it.
Well, Brett, I enjoyed kind of learning a little bit more about the cover dog trials. Hopefully, maybe this fall or next spring we'll link up in
You should
person.
do. Yeah. If I were you, I would see. Just depending on your schedule, do a spring training trip. Come up and run on the spring birds and check out a trial. That would be a pretty fun trip, but it's a long drive for you, so I don't know.
The drive doesn't. I mean, I'm used to driving by now. The drive, more or less, I enjoy the drive. It's kind of my quiet time for once. Is when I can get in the truck and go for a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's kind of more or less what I was aiming to do this past spring. I had a couple buddies up that area that I was talking about linking up, and just for one reason or another, every single weekend I kind of had penciled in for one of the trials. Something came up that got canceled and life got in the way. So whether it happens this fall or next spring or both, it's on my radar. I'm going
Yeah.
to experience it. It's just a matter of when, not if.
Yeah. Well, I guess I will leave you with this. I'll plug the Grand National. It starts, I think, November 5th. And most of the cover's down by then. And if you've ever were curious, that would be a fun event to come see. It's going to be near Eau Claire. You can Google the Chippewa Valley Grouse Dog Association, and there's information on their website about it. They will be just amazing dogs from all over the country that you can see will run.
Mm.
And so put that out there.
Yep.
If you're in the area, the Minnesota, Wisconsin area, there's the Chippewa Valley Grouse Dog Association, there's the Minnesota Grouse Dog Association, and there's the Moose River Grouse Dog Association. So you Google any one of those and you can get in touch with us and we'll be happy to show you the ropes.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate it. I enjoyed the conversation. I look forward to linking up in person whenever that might be. But I'm excited.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
I always enjoy learning new things and getting my butt kicked in new venues. It's always fun. So
Yeah, it is.
yeah.
All right.
All right, Brett. You have a good
great
day.
day.